Very serious now, very serious. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Two Wizards and a Mic, where a couple of old dudes talk about D&D, and they want you to have a better game, because playing a game is important. It's fun. It has no agenda at all. It's a game. So, Andrew, hi, how are you doing?
Good. Yeah, just waiting for the snowfall tonight.
Yeah, it's supposed to start tonight, and it's supposed to go again tomorrow night. Apparently, Wednesday they've upgraded our blizzard, whatever the heck. But -1, we're all gonna die. Maybe
Well, it's
-2.
interesting how the last 10 years, all of a sudden, we're starting to get snow and some freezing weather. Most of the year is way hotter than normal, much hotter, and we have all the
True.
issues with forest fires. But in fact, I read that there's still forest fires up north, which is
Really?
yeah.
I had no idea.
I
That
also
is
saw the
actually kind of
stats
terrifying.
that last year 19 million hectares were burned in Canada, and the year before 1.5 million hectares were burned.
I that It's a number I don't want to think about
Yeah, yeah.
because
So,
it is so huge. It feels like the end of days are upon us.
well, we have some work to do, that's for sure.
Let's burn all the forests. Yeah, get rid of them all. Just get rid of them now. Uh, it's only Tuesday. Um, uh, Today's topic. I sort of had to change gears of thinking about the world ending in forest fires. But today we're talking about travel in D&D, which is something that all campaigns, no matter where you are, you do. You either planes, actually not planes. Well, actually maybe dragons, maybe planes, trains. Trains would be wagons, and
Dragons, hippogriffs, and flying carpets.
there you go, done.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, it's a kind of it's one of those overlooked things, I think, because there are all kinds of important nuance to it. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. But before we talk about that, is there any update on the Kickstarter?
Yeah. So we have the two Kickstarters right now, the Monsters of the Dungeon Kickstarter. So the books are actually now, there's a few of them that have been printed already. And the UK printer was faster than the one in the US. So there's actually
Very
books being
cool.
shipped already as of yesterday to UK backers. And then I've ordered a number of American, Canadian, German, one Austrian um, books so far from the US printer. So these are going out to the backers around the world. We're waiting for the soft cover version to arrive at the office so we can double check it. And then the soft cover versions will be ordered. And yeah, that Kickstarter is in really good shape. Like we're talking more than 50% of the orders have shipped.
Nice.
And the other Kickstarter is our World of Mir one, which I'm currently finishing the manuscript for. And I'm getting down to finer details like the tributaries of rivers, naming those, and
Nice.
highlighting a few specialties in some taverns, some meals that they might have at certain taverns. So we're getting down to the fine details, and we're hoping that that manuscript can be done in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Kick ass. That's
And
awesome.
yeah, and the maps for the World of Mir too. We don't have too much more to do with that.
So basically, you're in the tail end, and we will have books fairly quickly. Actually, I guess is that true?
For the dungeon book,
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And for the sorry,
for the
I'm
the Mir book,
hoping the books are actually going to be in our hot little hands in terms of uh oh my lord, my phone's ringing. Get out of here. Um for the World of Mir book, but
yeah, the
I'm
World of
jumping
Mir
I'm
book,
jumping ahead in time.
yeah, World of Mir. So next month, the end of this month, and then next month there'll be a lot of art to do and finishing the maps and the layout. So yeah, we target April to hopefully get everything done for the Mir book, but it's possible we could have the PDF ready in March. Maybe even the books will be ready. So yeah, probably March or April. And yeah, the publishing continues.
Well, I'm looking forward to the adventures. I'm like so far ahead. There's all these things that I want to have now. I want it today. Finish that manuscript and send me a PDF. Actually, that's pretty much every single Kickstarter that's has some sort of book related to it. So travel, travel, travel. Um, First of all, what brought this to mind for our topic today?
Well, we have talked before about how sometimes the real adventure is between adventures, and we've actually written a couple of books about that. Called we have the Between Dungeons um, handbook on drive through, and we have the Between Adventures handbook on the DM's Guild, and that's to remind game masters that there can be so much that can happen between the dungeon and the town and the castle and the seaport, and that sometimes the funnest part of the games can be what happens in between these locations. And the party, first of all, they can get lost. That's a simple thing. um, you can have them do a wilderness check in 5e to see if they survival is a wilderness check, wisdom check to see if they're lost. Um, they have to be careful of supplies, so potentially they could run out of supplies and food. And strategy can be very important. And when you're traveling, there's certain places you don't want to go. Um,
Right, right.
like on Sunday night, the group that you're in, the party is trying to stay away right now from the kingdom's forces because they are very wary of them. So they're traveling under the cover of darkness, and they're actually going to swim across a river to try to avoid detection as well. So you
That's
want to do
right.
some, it helps to do some reconnaissance, scouting ahead, which is a theme of mine. Um, and of course, the basic method of traveling is going to be by foot, especially at the beginning of these games, because your players don't have enough gold to buy horses
Yeah,
or travel and by other means. So when you're on foot, you can forage for food. You might run into an inn or tavern on the road. Um, those are useful to have because usually when you have an inn or a tavern, it's in a settlement. And that means that the encounters are limited because there's not likely to be a giant or a demon or a certain kind of creature. But when
yeah,
it's an inn or a tavern that's in the wilderness, anything is up. Anything could happen, and I like that quite a bit. Then the terrain is always an issue, and if it's difficult terrain in 5e, that means you're moving about half as fast as normal. The weather, like a storm, can affect ranged weapons. Um, Again, it can make the terrain difficult if there's a flood. You could have paths or roads that are washed out, bridges that are damaged. You could have rope bridges that provide a certain kind of challenge. There can be landslides and avalanches. So the party really feels the effects of the weather and the terrain once they're on foot. Um, Out in the open in the wilderness, especially at lower levels, they're easy targets. And there's more of a chance, again, that there could be monsters in the wilderness than if you're in a town or a city.
yeah. Like there's all of those kinds of things. Everything you've mentioned is actually to me. I've played campaigns where the travel has just been, where are you going to go? We're now going to this location. Great. All right, you've arrived.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is ever discussed because that, the travel could have been, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, but there's nothing happening within that. But in the games that I'm with, when I'm playing, that you're running, we always encounter something. There's going to be, I mean, very few times are there, if we've just finished something, we're trying to get to a location and we still have a bit of travel to go, it's usually fairly uneventful. We get there, but you'll always have something where you meet somebody on the road. You might, they're just traveling by, and the players can choose whether or not to interact with that party or whatever it is. We've had dragons kind of stumble out of the woods, be like, "Hi, how's it going? We're gonna eat you now."
Hmm.
Um, there's all kinds of stuff like thinking about stuff that gets washed out because a lot of the time people are, they if they have to transport something, they're going to either get a fleet of horses or they're going to get some sort of thing like a wagon or some floating object that they can put stuff on. And you never really think about that. Oh, we've actually chosen this route and now we're here. There was a landslide, it wiped out the road, we have to figure out a way to get around it, which is actually it's such a real thing to happen. Like there's nothing that you've described that is completely insane. Like, oh yeah, worms are gonna, I don't know, suddenly pop out of the ground and they suck the wagon into the ground. Like that kind of stuff. I mean, that could happen, but ultimately, just the day to day living in a fantasy world is also impactful on what the characters are doing from, in this particular case, from getting from point A to point B. And like on the weekend, we were traveling from one location to another. We encountered some people. We encountered a creature. We encountered some towers that we could have gone to as the party. Could have like, oh, there's a tower here. We could check that out or go and talk to the people that are there. Um, we had opportunities all the way along, so it wasn't just like, okay, so now you've left town X, you're now in town Y, and or at the outskirts of town Y. Like there's I like that. It's just the lived world experience uh, is very helpful. So
Yeah, I think it helps. It is an opportunity to make the world feel real. You can't overdo it and have too many encounters and too many things happen in between the locations. But many times I like they're my Lucas elements. Like I always want to make sure, merchants is something you're probably going to run into, and it helps the world seem real because you understand what the economy is like. Um,
yeah,
Soldiers who be patrolling that certain kingdom or that area, pilgrims, right? There's so many different kinds of people and that you could run into. Um, you could even have people. Actually, I thought of something today I never did before, which was you could have people like rebuilding a road or a bridge that had been damaged. Um, you could meet other adventurers that are traveling. So there's so many ways to help the world feel real, elements that you could add. Um, I often mention the wildlife that's around while you're traveling. Like I'll say, oh, you see some deer off to the right in the woods, or a hawk flies over the trail. Just little things like that that actually help the world come to life.
and it's that opportunity thing where the party doesn't necessarily have to trot off to go check out the deer or do something to see what the hawk is up to. It's just they could, I suppose, they could say, "Oh, hey, we're gonna follow where the hawk is going. Maybe it'll lead us somewhere," which will totally screw with a lot of DMs because they'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
but it's all about that opportunity where you have the the collective storytelling part of it. Uh, if you don't have those opportunities, it can get pretty boring, and I think that, or at least you miss a lot of the game where you're not being led down the garden path, as it were, and you're going down the garden path, being gently led, but then you're getting flowers thrown at you, or you're getting, oh my god, I can't, the cobblestones are broken here. So that all of that kind of stuff going from one location to another is I just I sound like a broken record, but I like it. I like that lived world, and I think it's something that just you don't get it a lot of the time because there's no there's not enough people that own the in between dungeons handbook, which you can get on what's that website called? Drive
Well,
through RPG.
yeah, one of them is on our website and drive through, and the other is on DM's Guild. Um,
DM's Guild. That's the one.
yeah, Yeah, I think there's many setting books I've looked at that have nothing really. They don't really discuss anything about this, but you can also, you also offer up all these options for players to interact with, and they don't have to necessarily. Um, there's also tolls that people could have to pay on the road, or people collecting taxes for the kingdom. So there's so many
Ooh, I
opportunities to
like that one.
show. Yeah, you can show what the world is like, how things run, who's in charge, um, yeah, what kind of weather and terrain you're dealing with. Now, the next level after the players make some gold is that now you can actually buy a horse, travel by foot. You're now traveling twice as fast usually. However, you need stables for this horse wherever you go. Usually, you need food. You need some protection potentially for this creature. You can buy armor. Um, it gives the ability for you to carry a lot more. However, as we've mentioned before, the mount is a target, an easy one in D&D, and you might want to consider ways of protecting it. And they can also have a personality, which adds to the role playing. And one of our books, we go into great detail about, this horse hates elves, and this horse doesn't like going near water, and this horse doesn't like carrying too much weight, and this horse is scared of battle. So there's so many interesting things you could do. It doesn't have to be a horse. It could be a giant frog. It could be a hippogriff. Um, and these mounts can be expensive. A horse is expensive for a low level character,
Yeah.
but we did a whole show about mounts as well not that long ago. But you could ride an elk, a dragon potentially even, uh, giant eagle, Pegasus, a unicorn, and then there's mounts. If you're a halfling or a gnome, you could actually ride a mastiff or a giant weasel. You could, something not that big, and these can potentially be hard to handle. Um, they can be hard to find. But you might have to buy one.
It's actually the riding a mastiff. You've mentioned that before, and I kind of want to do that now. My next character will have to be a halfling.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's also the creativity of not just the mounts, but because there's a character that we had that had another character that was miniaturized or smaller, and
Mm-hmm.
they carried them,
Yeah.
and I thought that was cool. Um, just the touches like that that are, I guess, really. I don't want to say they're neglected, but I think they are to a lot of degree. Like to some, I mean, I'm going back in my mind of all the games I've played, but I think that we have to encourage other tables to think about those sorts of things by going to DM's Guild and purchasing everything by Cawood Publishing. Um, I'm a broken record. But of course, traveling on land is only one thing. In the uh, in the notes, I love the ice ship. That
Yeah. Well, I should
to
finish
me is
land by
amazing.
saying that,
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, it's
I'm
okay that
excited
there's
about that one.
there's also wagons, carts, carriages, um, and those can be for a fee, or you could potentially purchase it. These things can take some damage, so you might want to figure out like what's the armor class for a wagon or a cart, carriage, how many hit points damage could they take. You might have a skill check to be able to use these well, like a proficiency with vehicles. And as you mentioned there, yes, an ice ship in certain locations, that's another um, option. And we actually did that once. I'm not sure if you remember, up in one of
I do because I just love the idea of being in an environment where you have basically a sailing ship that's on ice rather than water. And I just
Mhm.
that's such a great concept, and I we've seen it before. It's not something brand new. It's been actually around for. I think Dragonlance had it as well, in one of their adventures. But I just like the uniqueness of a lot of these styles of travel, which I think are just the coolest things ever.
Yeah, ice ship was pretty fun. We did that up on one of the northern continents in Mir, and a person kept doing a vehicle skill check, and they were actually doing really well for quite a while, and flying around or shooting around on this thing on the ice with the party, and then eventually they failed miserably, and the thing went crashing. Luckily, if you're that in that sort of situation, often you're crashing into snow. So
Yes.
luckily that's what ended up happening. It could have been crashing into ice, and the ice breaks, and then there's a whole other scene. Yeah, so that's another level. First you're on foot, then you get a horse, then maybe potentially you have some sort of vehicle. The next step is a really big jump up, which is going by ship, which can be anything from a rowboat to a keelboat to a sailing ship or a big galley. These can be very expensive. Some of them are tens of thousands of gold. There's some prices for these in the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide. There's fantastic rules in the new Saltmarsh book for ships. A lot of detailed information. There's little maps of the ships of what they would look like. That's the only good part about that book, but it's really good in my opinion. But that part is really good. The Ghosts of Saltmarsh, the ship section is really well done. Um, and yeah, these open up whole new areas. You have to hire a crew if you have a large ship. You have to guard it when it's in port, and you can have ship to ship battles, which are, fantastic.
Yes. I mean, the fact that you have a you're not just rolling dice for yourself, you're rolling dice for a group in a
Mhm.
lot of those sorts of situations. And I find that very stressful because it's like, I better roll good. Because otherwise, this is going to not just hurt me, it's going to hurt a bunch of people. And I like the idea that you have the skill checks to do these things because that's one thing that a lot of people tend to. I'm going to buy a horse. Does your character know how to ride a horse? Has your character ever ridden a horse? What about piloting, driving a wagon? What about guiding a ship? Like all these kinds of situations are come up, I think, in my mind for uh, making sure that your character can actually do the thing you're doing because that again is another opportunity for mishaps to occur, glories to occur, where you use the ship in a way that might have been accidental or you could have been on purpose. Maybe your character just happened to roll really well, but was not necessarily proficient in that particular skill because of reasons. They might have to pilot the ship because the person who had the skill is unconscious or whatever. But it gives you those kinds of story beats where you can, uh, have something go awry, like the ice thing. But yeah, I just think it's really it kind of adds another layer because you don't just jump in a car and drive away. You have to learn how to operate the machine. You have to learn the ins and outs of it because horses can get injured. Boats could break like just naturally, like just wear and tear. Like it's oh,
Mhm.
we're leaking. Well, why are we leaking? Oh my God, what's attacking us? Well, nothing. The wood is rotten. Can you fix your
Yeah.
boat now? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that section in the Ghost of Saltmarsh goes into so much detail about just what you're talking about. Damaged ships, running into a storm, you get caught in a whirlpool. There's so many things that could happen. There could be a mutiny. Um, there's so many, somebody could just get seasick, right, and end up being incapacitated. So yeah, it really adds another level of more flavor to the whole adventure. Now moving on to a new heights literally is the flying aspect. So the spell fly is very short lived, but there are magic items you could use to fly. There's having a flying mount, flying carpets, flying broomsticks, magical wings you can get, and using an airship. And these are all, real game changes because they give you such an advantage if you're in the air to scout out an area, to escape. And the one drawback, as we've mentioned before, is that if
Yeah.
you get damaged too badly or your mount dies and you're in midair or the magic item fails to work, you've got a long way to get to the ground.
Yeah, that has happened in our adventures.
Yeah, that happened to
A
you.
couple of times. It happened. I remember. I forgot why I was in the air, but it was above a lake, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly.
I believe you were on a rock, this giant bird, and you were fighting him, and
Right.
you were very happy because you defeated him. But then you and the party realized that you were, about 100 feet, 150 feet in the air above the party, and the rock couldn't fly anymore, and
I mean,
gravity was
again,
coming
that's the
into
stuff
effect.
that's awesome. Gravity is important, and
Yeah,
I relearned that in that adventure. But
yeah.
it's always in the back of the mind too. It's like I'm gonna climb on this thing and I'm gonna fight it,
Mhm.
and you're kind of in the thinking about it like, I don't know, is that actually a good idea? And that's fine. I'm above water. I can't die that way, can I?
Yeah,
The DM's like, actually, yeah, you can.
yeah. I liked what one DM did. He said falling damage into water or onto water, he does it cut it in half. So it's supposed to be every 10 feet in 5e, it's 1d6 damage. And the maximum's like, I think 10d6 or something. Anyway, when you hit it, when you land into water, he just decided to do that, but then cut the damage in half. Um, yeah, it's one way to do it. Um, so another level of transport would be teleportation, either doing the teleport spell or using a circle, a permanent circle, or one that's being conjured. Now, and there's also, of course, the helm of teleportation.
Right.
So these you can actually do multiple people, especially with teleport. You can do 10 people. I think helm of teleportation you can as well. So you can do your whole party, and you can go to a place that you've known before, as long as it's on the same plane of existence. There's Shane. He's back from on our plane. And
I know. I just lost the monitor for some reason.
yeah, so as long as you're on the same plane, as long as you know the place, you can do that. But then you can add some subtleties where it doesn't work 100%. So maybe you get near where you want to go, or it doesn't, or it's possible it doesn't work. But this, level of being able to travel around um, is much easier than many of the others, and obviously much faster.
Yeah. I mean, to me, teleportation is okay. Portals for long distance travel, stuff like that, tend to. I mean, they're cool. I got to admit that part, but sometimes I kind of feel like it's cheating. Like you've stepped onto an airliner and you've
Yeah,
flown somewhere and you're landing and it's. But I mean, for the purposes of storytelling, I mean, they work really, really well.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I joked in our notes that they're a great storytelling device, literally and figuratively.
that's so true.
Um,
That's so true.
but you are 100% correct, I think. And that's why I would only, and really the game actually only introduces these at higher levels. People shouldn't be getting the teleport spell at low levels or even mid levels,
Yeah.
really. It's a higher level spell, and portals as well. I think it's kind of reserved for a higher level, but those kind of things I think you need at that level because the stakes are much higher, right?
Yeah.
Uh, the adventurers might be traveling to another plane um, through a portal. They might be chasing somebody through a portal. There might be trying to save the world, and they don't really have time to get on a horse and ride for 5 days.
I mean it's such a great thing because the portal that always reminds me is in Tomb of Horrors,
Mm,
where there's the portal that you just disappear. The
hmm.
character is gone,
For good, yeah.
and I love that idea that portals or mystical ways of traveling are
Unpredictable.
not exactly not always. You're not just because it says it's going to planet X or wherever it's up to. It's not necessarily going to go there. you could just kind of blink out of existence. Or, as we've found so many times, we're suddenly in a different plane, and we can't get back. We have to kind of wait for something to progress within the adventure before that actually happens. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think it's
think
actually yeah.
yeah, I think it's you're right. Again, I think that again it depends how powerful the characters are. They can be a great device. We have them in the world of Mir, but what we're going to do is we're going to add a table in this world book that gives you that you can roll on if you want to have some extra event happen with the use of the portal. So maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it sends you to a different place in that world. Maybe it sends you to another world. Maybe it calls forth a guardian that will now protect the portal and won't let you get through. Maybe it actually calls forth and summons something to aid you, a creature that could aid you. So maybe when you go through the portal, your magic items suddenly don't work for an hour. So
That's a great. Oh, I love that. Like
yeah,
you have some sort of penalty for using those
yeah,
kinds of. Right. Oh, I
yeah,
like that. I like that a lot.
yeah, exactly. Or maybe you fall asleep, or maybe you forget who you are for an hour or something. Like there's it, it's such a powerful tool to have, a device to have that when you say that it's cheating, I think it is if it's just that you can kind of go wherever you want, unless maybe you're again exceptionally high levels. But
Yeah.
in general, I think there should be many sides to these items. That's why I love magic items that have more than one side, like especially ones that give a boon to the character, but then also there's some downside to it. And
Right.
I would put portals in the same, in that same category that, sure, maybe they'll work sometimes, maybe they'll be really useful, but other times they could, you know, take the story in a new direction.
Well, I ran a game where a character, one of the NPCs you run into, had access to a portal, and and this is like level one characters that are encountering this thing. But the twist that I gave was there was this big build up to this whole idea. There was a portal they could use, and then they get to the portal if they choose to go there, and the NPC that they encounter to reveal this portal exists. They, if the character is based, well, where does it go? And the NPC goes, I have no idea. I've never used it. It's terrifying to me, but I have it. Like I rub this rock, and suddenly it's there, but I've
Hmm.
no idea. I've thrown stuff through and it's never come back. I don't know what's on the other side, and nothing has come
Hmm.
through. So there's kinds of things like that you can play with that idea of having a I call them a penalty, but essentially, as you said, a downside to accessing such powerful things early games. So that
Yeah, that's a really good example. Once I showed one of your parties, they were in some castle where there were portals to every single one of the 9 continents in Mir, and they could see through to each of these continents, and each of them had a scene. Yeah, and I also had a song for each when they looked at each portal, and they got a sense of what the whole world was like just by looking through these portals. But they chose to only go through two of them, and I think two of them, and one of them they just went through briefly and then they came back. So even high level characters, will it's fun to present them with options in terms of this kind of travel, and it doesn't necessarily mean they have to take every route.
Yeah, and I think that's the important part of all of this is that I call them opportunities where you're giving them presenting them with some information that could change the direction of where they're going. Um, but you're letting them make the choice. The players will be, hey, you've got this thing, this opportunity to do this thing, but like traveling on a road where you're encountering different people or seeing things off to the side or above, You don't have to do anything. The characters could say, you know what, screw it. We got to get to, Nottingham. We got to get there. It's a 4 day trip by foot. Um, they could encounter things along the way that they do decide to, oh, well, we have to fight these bandits because they're trying to do highway robbing or whatever. Um, but, those kinds of encounters they kind of have to deal with if they're being attacked. But everything else, is kind of, you don't have to jump on that rock and fly it into the air and kill it and then have to deal with that part. I could have done 2,500 other things. Uh, but yeah, I think that a resource like In Between, as well as just getting creative with characters moving within the world, and not necessarily just saying, yeah, okay, you get there, you made it, nothing happened.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to have, you know, at least it depends again at what makes sense in the world. Like if you're going from one small village to another village, like that's only, a few miles away, then maybe you only had one encounter. Or maybe you just saw the beasts in the wilderness. But if it's, if you travel for, half a day or more, then hopefully you have a world that has a bit more to it. And again, I
Yeah,
would have a few encounters there, and they don't all have to be ones that the party gets involved with, but you offer up this opportunity. Um, and I often, most of my encounters that I have ready for a session, I have set so they can be moved around. So, and many times those are moved around in the wilderness more than the city because that's easier to do. Um, and yeah, that gives you opportunity to make the world feel more immersive.
exactly. And that to me is the most important component of anything that D&D can do, um, is to have the ability to provide a lived-in environment. Because I always think, when I think of D&D in terms of what is the world like, it's lived in. It must be lived in. People have been around, creatures have been around, history has been around, and things like Lord of the Rings have that in huge amounts. And but when you're homebrewing, or when you're doing something on your own, or running an adventure that's a module you've picked up somewhere, um, being able to flesh those things out is crucial. Because I always think of Star Wars and Star Trek, and when you think of those two universes, Star Trek is always presented, generally, not all the time, but is this sort of utopian kind of, everything is clean, everything is organized, where Star Wars kind of takes a different look at the world, where stuff is used, stuff is encountering weather, vehicles, people, robots, all those kinds of things are living in the world, and the world just doesn't provide them a place to live. It's actually interacting with those characters
Mhm.
and those items that you're seeing. And like going into any adventure, like if you um, find a sword as part of a reward for defeating a particular foe, having those little details that you were saying, um, you grab the sword. I'll now describe the sword, and there's going to hopefully be something in there where, yeah, but the blade is a bit of it's hit something really hard, and there's a bit of a dent, or a piece is missing, which the player could be like, oh well, oh that's so cool. I've got a thing with a blah blah blah, or oh, I got to find that piece. Where is that piece? And that could actually invent on the spot. Although most DMs will have these things prepared, that the piece of that sword won't impact the use of it, but maybe that player is like, actually, this character really wants to go after it. It's a completionist. It must have that piece and somehow rejoin it with that blade, and blah 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 blah. So it has all of these opportunities to do different things, which might be crazy or it might be awesome. You never know until you try. So yeah. So by the way, make sure to go to worldofmirror.com to find out where you can buy these books that we're referring to.
Well, and I should mention to finish up that we're talking about this going out to the Kickstarter backers. So that's happening now. So that means that next week this is actually going to be released publicly. So it should be Tuesday that this will be available in printed form or PDF on drive-through. And the PDF will be available at our website. That'll actually be the best price. If you want to buy PDFs of our books, the best price is always going to be on the website. And then we'll have printed versions available at drive-through as well.
Very cool. And by the way, that website, it's called a certain name. It's called something like worldofmyr.com. That's WORLDOFMYRR.com. I'm getting good at the sales part, I gotta say. Yeah. But seriously, people, I think we'll wrap it up there because we've been talking for a while. But are there any final words for the Kickstarter? I mean, we've already kind of talked about it in great detail, but just in case.
Just that a lot of the Canadian and American orders will be going out. Some of them have gone out. Some of them went out last week. There's some going out this week. And then I've started to work on a few of the European orders. And then we have some more overseas orders like to Australia and New Zealand. Yeah, so that's all underway. And the first books, as I mentioned, are ones that are in the UK that should be arriving any day. So that's great to hear.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching, listening, and joining us on this adventure. We, of course, do this for fun. So make sure you spread the word so we can have even more fun. And sponsors and millions of advertising dollars. Nope, no one cares. It's so sad. But again, seriously, thank you. All of the information that we talked about, there will be links if they are required. They'll be all downstairs, down below, and you, of course, we're here almost every week. So come check us out, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Later.